I always tell people you're my go-to expert for all things AI, machine learning, deep learning, but can you share just a brief summary of your background?
Yeah, so I've got a PhD in cognitive science. I've been working with neural networks for about 30 years, off and on. And most recently, I was a director of data science. And now I am the founder of Cybazent. And yeah, so I've been just trying to stay on top of all things AI for the last couple of years and just constant breakthroughs in generative AI, both text and imagery and video. There's so much happening that itself is a full-time job.
Yep, yep.
But
Thank
so
you.
hopefully, yeah, we can share some of those insights.
So thank you for that. Okay, so in a previous session, we ran a webinar sharing with people what we were learning, and I was learning during my first week working with LLM. So I got some practice and was working on prompting with ChatGPT 4 and Claude.
Mm.
And that was a really interesting exercise, and I learned a lot. The attendees learned a lot. Before we even start talking about how to build a GPT, can you talk a little bit about why researchers and product managers, why would we want to, and under what circumstances would we want to build a GPT? And what
Yes.
is the GPT?
Yeah, that's OpenAI's kind of name for their apps that you can build with their whatever their latest version is. It's 4.0 right now. And it is a way to help you help yourself do some kind of repetitive task. So any repetitive cognitive task can be automated essentially with AI now. And so that's a way to think about what is something that you do every day, you do a lot, and kind of the basic fundamental steps of that are like very repetitive. It's like you're going through the same process, you're trying to do the same thing over and over again. Those pieces are not really of interest. You're more interested in that final product.
Okay, yeah.
So as we talked about before, it's like sometimes in UX, you're really interested in the process. You really want to understand all those pieces underneath. You, as the human, need to know
Mm-hmm.
those things. And that should not be automated. But GPTs are really good for those cases where it's, I just want to get to the end. Let me get there as quickly as possible. And this is
Yeah.
something that you do often and don't want to have to think about because you've got other things to think about, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm also assuming another thing we've talked about with researchers and product managers is when thinking about this, the level of risk of having the GPTs go off. So you had asked me for this exercise to come up with a couple of scenarios and use cases of how I might want to build a GPT. And back to when we were talking in our last webinar, I do want a lot of visibility into research synthesis and UX research synthesis. I started thinking about where it was less of a priority for me to have that visibility. And there were a couple of use cases that I have for you, and I did share these in advance. But my thought was, here's the first scenario where I'd love to walk through building a GPT. So I'm a working mom with a little kid. I'm not always proactively going out shopping for and meal planning every week. So one thing that I thought would be very helpful for me is every day opening my refrigerator, I have 5 or 6 ingredients available to me in the refrigerator. Might we build a GPT where with those ingredients, the GPT comes back with suggestions and recommendations for what I might make for dinner. So that was the first GPT. If we have time for a second, I have another scenario, but this was the one top of mind for me.
Okay.
I haven't gone shopping.
Okay.
So given that scenario, before we even have you share your screen, I guess my question is, with that scenario, what would we consider first? Like, what considerations do we think about before building the GPT?
Yeah, so that is a repetitive cognitive task. You
Mm-hmm.
think and figure things out,
Yeah.
and it's not something that you really enjoy if cooking is not your passion, right?
No.
something
Mm-hmm.
to do this for you. And at the same time, be able to creatively come up with something that's fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a young kid, so they have to like it also. Right.
That's something I didn't even mention, but absolutely, if I'm getting these recommendations, it's not helpful if it's just for me. If he's not going to eat it,
Right.
absolutely. Like, how do we tailor that
Yeah.
recommendation as well? Yeah.
Yeah. So what you want to think about is what are all of the constraints actually that you would have to consider when creating this meal? Your kid hates broccoli or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that should be known, right?
Yeah.
Or there are allergies, a peanut allergy or something like that. That's something that should be known. These are the constraints that this GPT will need to give you a good answer, right? So thinking about all the things that you don't want is a critical step to the process.
Yeah.
And you can have those baked in, and so you can tell it up front, or you can design the GPT to be more general. So you could say, ask me if I have any allergies, me if I have favorites or dislikes or something, right?
Okay. Okay.
Or you can bake that in. So depending on like how often you'll use this, you might want to bake those in. If this is like once a week and some of those variables might change, then
Mm-hmm.
that should be something that you have it ask you. So if you have dinner guests or something and all of those things might change, but you still want to use that same GPT, then it should be that interactive situation.
Okay. Okay. This particular scenario for my major use case, and it's something I wanted to ask you about. So the constraints, if my son doesn't like an ingredient, it won't be one of the 6 ingredients in my refrigerator. So like the way I've been like, that's what I'm trying to figure out. There's the GPT for me and my needs, but
Yeah.
I'm also assuming part of the goal is to make something that is valuable and useful to others when you're building a GPT. Is that accurate?
It depends, right? I was just listening to this AWS webinar on generative AI. And so they've got these new tools for internal use, building apps like these GPTs. And they mentioned that it's easier to build your own than to find one that's already built and then learn how to use that one.
Interesting.
That's what they're finding in their own internal use. And yeah, these are so easy to make at this point that you should just think about yourself. It's what do you need? Make it just for you. What's going to be most useful for you that you'll want to use it again and again because it's so perfect for you. So
Okay.
I think that's the way to think about it now.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let's think about me. Let's do this. The scenario for me, and this is the typical scenario, is that I am not proactively having a bunch of ingredients in my house. Constraints here, and feel free to ask me questions if that will
Yeah.
be helpful. But as I'm thinking about the constraints, the majority of the meals I'd like to be meals that would take 30 minutes or less
Okay.
to
Okay.
make. My hope is that I can base them just on the ingredients I have in the house. Are there other considerations and constraints right now that you'd like to ask me about before we start trying to build?
So another one might be like which meal this is.
Okay, yeah, dinner, definitely dinner.
Okay. Do we want to make that pre-baked, or do you want it to ask you which meal you're working on? Because it might change.
Let's ask which meal because it might
Okay.
change. Okay, and for dinner, to what degree of constraints should we have? Like a typical situation I have is I want there to be some protein, some vegetable, and some fruit. Like it's not super complex, but I like having a somewhat balanced meal.
So it is okay. So that's another thing to think about. So this is a whole meal, not like a dish and
Yeah.
a recipe for that dish, right? If you do have broccoli, it could just be steamed broccoli plus some
Yeah.
chicken or whatever, right? And okay, so that's another kind of
I like thinking through this. I don't know
yeah.
what I would want. I think Yeah, I think my goal is it could be on the side, it could be like a one pot, one plate meal, but the big goal is overall that it's balanced, regardless of whether something is on the side or in the one meal. This might make it tricky. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, yeah. All right, let me share my screen.
Okay. And giving people just a sense, I know this because you've shared this with me, but you're creating the GPT using, will this be Chat GPT 4?
Yeah. So I've got 4.0, their newest
Okay.
advanced model. And I believe you do have to have a paid subscription to create your own GPTs.
Okay.
You can access others now for free, but to create them, I think you do need to have a paid account. And so I restarted my ChatGPT account for this, and so we'll see how it goes.
Thank you. Are there other places where people can build GPTs, or is it really all things?
Like this. So Claude has their new projects kind of page. I think that's a little bit different than, at least the workflow is a little bit different than this. And yeah, so we'll just use ChatGPT for now.
Okay. Okay.
You're on the regular page, you can go into your account, go to My GPTs, and then we'll create a new GPT. So this is a meta process. So you are talking with ChatGPT to create the GPT. So this is their GPT builder. What we can do is have this conversation with the builder first, and then we'll go into the configure and see what it has built. But we'll try to work just with the builder for now, right?
Okay. And to orient me a little bit, the language and what we're seeing here. So you mentioned the builder. I see that we're on a create
Yeah.
section, and on the other side is a preview section. Basic questions for me. So what will be happening here? So this is the builder UI.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk with the builder to talk about all the things that we just mentioned that we want to
Okay.
this GPT that does X. And then on the right side will be that GPT. So we can
Okay.
test it out and then have this back and forth with the
Okay.
builder. And what I found is like that conversation takes you only so far, 3 or 4 steps, and then anything that you're trying to deal with after that, you have to go into the configure. We'll take a look at that when we get there.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so let's start talking about our constraints. So I need a meal planner for a mother and son to create meals given the ingredients on hand. Something like that.
Yes. Much more succinct than I had described
Okay.
it.
Uh,
Absolutely.
to get things going on the right foot, let's go ahead and put in our constraints. And are the things, what are the variables and what are the constraints?
Okay.
It should ask which meal, what ingredients are available.
How much time I have for prep and cooking?
Is that a constant or is it always under half an hour?
Yeah, fair enough. I think this would be an excellent constraint because on a weekend, I may be ambitious and cook something a bit more elaborate.
Okay, so how much time I have?
Yeah.
Any other variables?
At this point, would we put anything in about a well-balanced meal, or as it's asking me about the ingredients? I'm assuming I'll put in ingredients that are well-balanced. So maybe it's
Oh,
not
let's
a necessary constraint.
we can tell it. It should all meals should be
Okay. Okay. Okay.
and how much time I have to make them. Okay, some constraints are there, do you have any allergies or Ben?
Nope. Ben, my son will not eat rice. But again, if the GPT asks me what ingredients I have on hand, I would not put in rice. So do we need to include that constraint or
Oh,
not?
so I guess another question is if you're missing like one ingredient, is there a store you can run to and just get that one thing? Is that, does that ever happen?
Yeah. Yes. So there could be a recommendation if there's only one missing ingredient. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
The
Well,
the priority would be
okay.
for the GPT to return something that includes only the ingredients I have, because it's not typical as a working mom that I would want to be going out shopping right before. Like the big use case is short on time, it's time for dinner. I did not go to the store, and given what I have here, what could I cook?
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, let's not push it just yet.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, yeah, some other constraints. Anything that he won't eat
No,
besides rice?
he's pretty open besides rice.
Okay. And then let's see, what else did we mention for constraints? We've got time. It's going to ask ingredients. It's going to ask the meal. Anything, yeah, any other kind of constants that it doesn't need to ask.
I think this covers it.
Okay, all right.
Let's see what happens. Okay, so what do you do?
Okay,
So you just submitted. Okay.
okay, so let's see what we got. Okay. There's meals. Okay, so it's regurgitating its constraints for itself. So it's to itself to make sure it understands the problem, right?
Yep.
And this is a friendly meal planner that this is the thing we're going to build. What these GPTs also do is come up with these prompt starters. So these are the things that show up on the right. So you can just click on these things to get the conversation going. So that's also very convenient. And then let's see, yeah, so it's saying what we told it to ask. Healthy meal buddy. Okay. Cool.
That works for me. Excellent name.
All right. So we're having this conversation with the builder. Okay, so that's a great name.
Do you need to approve? Oh, do you have another name in mind? So yes, you're answering the builder. Yep. Okay.
It loves to make a little profile picture for you. Do we want a friendly hand-drawn style image?
Sure, sure.
Sure. This is just cute, but makes it fun.
Is this the builder integrating with Dolly, or what is the image? Okay.
Yeah. What do you think of that picture?
Lovely. That looks excellent. So what
What,
does that mean? To start, what specific goals or actions should Healthy Meal Buddy focus on when assisting you?
yeah, so this is actually new. I hadn't seen this kind of behavior before. And so it's now asking you to help it refine this tool for you.
Okay.
And so we really want to focus on a full meal that is healthy, or a full balanced meal that is healthy, is quick to make. So we said this already,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking that this will re-emphasize what it's going to build for you.
Okay.
All GPTs, all these LLMs, it's all about providing context, right? So you need to give it enough context that it can provide the correct answer. And sometimes the way to do that is to re-emphasize some things that are most important, right? So it biases the context towards those things.
Okay.
So I think that's what we're doing here. Is there anything else you can think of right now that we would?
No, not yet. I'm also wondering, this brought up another thing that I've wondered about. Like, you haven't seen this before, and it's something that I'm trying to figure out about LLMs.
Yeah.
Like building a GPT, what's happening? This is new. Is this because I don't know what is
Um,
happening here? Why are we
I
seeing
think
this now and you haven't seen this in the past?
so. My guess is I used Chat GPT 3 the last
Okay,
time I built something, and so this is the 4.0 version.
I see. Okay.
Uh, and this is better behavior. So it's like
Yeah.
some more context before I build anything.
Okay.
So I think that's perfectly appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see what it responds to here. Okay. So it is updating things. So again, so these are things that we try to preempt, right? But it's saying,
Yeah.
are there dietary preferences, cooking methods to avoid? So here's another question for you. What equipment do you have?
Or would it be, what equipment do I not have? I have a lot of equipment. I have a food processor. I have
Right.
an oven, a microwave. I have all of what I view as
And
the essentials, a blender,
okay,
a
but you're not going to
toaster.
make. What about food genres? Can you make Chinese or Italian, or do you have preferences there?
The preferences. So we can make anything, because this is another scenario. I'd like to broaden what I'm cooking for my son. However, he does have favorites. So if we could prioritize
Yeah.
Italian, typical favorites of a little kid, Italian, Chinese food, American dishes, just traditional American. I don't know if the builder will know what I mean by that.
And hot dogs or something.
Oh, yes. So preferred foods. This is the challenge, preferred foods.
I
And
mean,
what would I
that'll
like to
be,
be cooking?
you'll
Thanks.
have the ingredients again. So there are
Absolutely.
implicit things
Okay.
that we can, again, it's like we might, that will come through when you give the ingredients.
Okay.
But you can also say, it's like, are you open to being adventurous or something?
Okay. I like that. I like that a lot.
Adventurous options should be given.
Or should be given as an option, because I think in the recommendations, I'd like to get something that I know would be a winner, but also if I'm being as adventurous as a mom, maybe one suggestion that's like, feeling adventurous tonight?
Yeah, yeah.
Something like that. I love that.
But in terms of avoiding things, you're
Avoiding recipes with raw vegetables. So the vegetables we would want to have cooked in some way, whether it's steamed or baked, but no raw vegetables.
okay. Okay. Any other constraints?
This looks good.
Okay. Let's see where it gets to.
Every time you hit return, I get nervous. So as you're hitting return, it is updating the preview or not?
Preview will just have these default prompts, so those probably
Okay.
too much. Oh, okay.
I like this. How should Healthy Meal Buddy communicate with me?
Yeah, so tone is definitely a thing that
Casual and friendly, please. I'm really curious what encouraging would be. You go.
go, girl.
You can do this. Okay, casual and friendly sounds about right. Could it add a joke for a kid that an 8-year-old kid would like? So we could have a joke of the day.
Joke meal that an 8-year-old would enjoy.
Yeah, that's excellent. Just adding in a little bit of pizzazz. Okay. Okay, we're going to have a kid-friendly joke.
All right. So, okay, so here's our GPT on the right.
Mhm.
Uh, you want to plan tonight's meal?
Sure. When it says, please try this out. So this has not, so please try this out and adjust it. So we're trying it out in the preview.
In the preview mode, yes.
Okay, but we technically haven't created this yet. We're just
I
testing
mean,
it.
it's there. When I hit create, then it'll be available for, I believe, anyone with a subscription to access.
Okay.
But
So
right now, it's just us.
I have in my home spaghetti.
Okay.
Oh, we're gonna go through the prompts. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So we'll say, okay, that was not correct. I want it to ask me what ingredients I have.
Yeah.
Uh, first thing it should do is ask me what ingredients and meal.
This speaks to it. This is not what we refer to as a hallucination, but back to when you're building a GPT, I believe you were pretty clear on that request, but the builder comes back with a list of ingredients that weren't ours. Is this just something that happens?
So yeah, this is, let's see what this does here.
Okay.
So
Okay.
now I'm
Okay.
testing this. All right.
Okay. So I have walnuts, spinach, basil, Parmesan cheese, hot dogs, chicken, turkey meat, like ground
Okay.
turkey. Yep. Corn,
On the cob.
just frozen corn. Yeah, frozen corn.
Okay.
Milk. Let me just think for a second. Apples, watermelon, blueberries.
There are all kinds of stuff. What are you
I
talking?
do have a lot in the house, but yeah. And let me think if I have other vegetables. I have right now raw carrots in the fridge and plain yogurt. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I do have a decent amount in the fridge.
All right. Got enough?
Wait, frozen broccoli. Okay, that's good. I'm really curious. Okay.
Okay.
So that was the first question. We had other constraints. So I'm anticipating that, well, yeah, let's see what it returns.
Okay.
Thank you, Builder. It said it looks like you have a nice set of ingredients. So this
So
is
really,
excellent. There's one recipe. I think, oh, when there's a side of fruit parfait. I my my expectation was that I would get two, and we didn't say this,
yeah.
so it's helpful getting this back, 2 to 3 choices for recipes. So I could see the options available and could choose. And
Mm.
here's a little joke for your son. Why did the spaghetti get invited to every party? Because it was always positively fun. Okay. That's an okay joke.
Okay.
Okay, so you're refining our or adding constraints.
Yeah. So I'm talking now back with the GPT builder on the left
Yep.
for giving the recipes. Let me choose which ones.
Okay. I'm also curious if the recipe it brought back is actually paying attention to our constraints of this needs to be a quick meal and things like that. But yes, let's see first what recipes it returns.
So it is using, so it's
Yeah,
accurate there.
yeah.
It's good.
I really like this. I liked that it offered a full meal too, where it was the entree, but it was also a side of yogurt parfait. I'm wondering if that would always happen. I'd like that to always happen.
Yeah. Yeah, so it said for dessert.
Yeah.
So it is giving kind of a meal. So that's good. And then, this one dish has your pasta, your meat, your vegetables all in it. So that's good too.
Okay. Okay.
This is,
So it's thinking really hard.
yeah. Let's give it a second.
We're waiting for this to load. I'm also wondering, you mentioned, was it the Amazon AWS?
Yeah.
I had wondered the finding that they're having, if you build a GPT, build it for your, it's simpler to build for yourself versus using something that's already out there. My assumption is when OpenAI put together their GPT library, that the hope was that people can use others' GPTs to make their lives more efficient. It sounds like that's not really coming to fruition.
I'm not sure what's happening there because that's more of a consumer space, and
Yeah.
the US was talking more internally. And
Okay.
so it might be it's, oh yeah, we will build this app for our team because a number of people on the team are all doing the same thing and want that.
Okay.
So that would make sense. But yeah, they just made this comment that it's often easier to just build your own from scratch and get exactly what you want than try to find something and then figure out how it's doing things and what assumptions it made and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas I think in the consumer space, I think the key there to the GPTs that are being built on OpenAI is that is there specific data that they have access to, right? So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
travel planner GPT is going to be very different from anything else because they've got all of this data, airlines and all of that stuff. But if you're like this recipe builder, there are probably a million recipe builders out
yeah.
there. And it's like finding the one that is doing exactly this is going to be harder than just building exactly this, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad this actually happened, like back to troubleshooting. And it's one of the reasons that I've been hesitant to build a GPT. And there's questions I'll have for you, even if this freezes up. But my first question is, if something like this happens, where it might just be freezing up, uh, what can we do? Can you like stop it, or could we
It
even,
stop. Yeah.
okay, or could we create? So my fear has been you get this far. We were now getting to very detailed refinement. Like the preview was pretty good. And
Yeah.
so a question I had for you, is there a way to salvage this if it's frozen? Or the second question is, if something is pretty good, if you create it, is there an option to come back and edit it once you build and create it? So both of those questions. Let's start with that one first. Supposing this was good enough, the preview was great. If we create this, is there any opportunity then to edit a GPT you built?
Sure. Yeah. You can always go back and edit these things.
Yeah.
And it'll be on your kind of list of GPTs.
Okay.
See if we lost everything.
Yeah, and I believe this happened when we tested this out together. Do you remember a couple of months back we tried this and I lost everything? That's where
Oh, yeah.
a
Okay. So
tip.
don't go back.
Okay, on the right-hand side, we have the preview of what we've built. If for those of you who are watching, if it looks a little bit different from what you saw before, it's because
We lost our work.
so Andrew kindly recreated the GPT. That's why we were both describing if you're close to where you want to get to for the GPT, create it. And you can always come back in and edit. But to that point, okay, we have the preview. And Andrew, you're going to show us a little bit about what's happening on the configure.
Yeah. So in this create tab, you're speaking with this GPT builder, but what it is doing is filling in all of these fields. And so you can, so we wanted this to be called healthy meal planner. So we can just edit directly there rather than having a conversation. It's like,
Yes.
no, please change the name, blah, blah, blah. And so we can just do that right here. And then this GPT assist users. Okay, so now we can give all the instructions we want here directly. So, the GPT will ask the user for ingredients, how much time. Okay, that's what we want. Nutrition, it was asking us about tone before. So we can say it should have a friendly tone and always provide a good, friendly joke. And so is this a variable or a constraint, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it always you and your son, right? We can say, yes, so all meals are for one adult and one 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Something like that. So we can X that question out. We don't need to
Mhm.
add that anymore. If you had your own recipes, you could add a bunch of recipes that you like and say it's like always consider one of these recipes.
Okay.
So you can't really do that in the create side of things, but you can upload files here. So that can be helpful. Um,
I'm
And
curious what your workflow is. Like back to we're working in the create area as we're getting started and having the conversation with the builder. Once we get close, are you typically then coming right over to the configure, or do you create first and then come back and edit?
yeah, so I start with create just to get the basics here, but then and this is where it got stuck is we wanted it to ask us or always provide three options, right?
Yeah.
And so it can just be easier at this stage. Always provide three options for meals before giving the recipe.
Okay. Yep.
And so it's if there's something you just know you want, just type it in. Let's don't try to convince it via that create tab to modify these things on its own.
Okay. Yep.
Um,
Okay. So if
no.
we're pretty happy with it,
So we'll try this once here.
okay. So what ingredients do we have?
So now,
Okay.
correct, it's asking us.
So we have spaghetti,
Spaghetti,
walnuts,
walnuts,
spinach,
spinach,
basil, broccoli, frozen broccoli, raw carrots, yogurt, Parmesan cheese, milk, chicken, hot dogs, ground turkey, blueberries, watermelon, apples, and that should be good. And let's see what if it brings back a couple recipes. Oh, how much time do I have for cooking? 30 minutes or less. Oh,
So that first one is what we got
I
before.
like number one.
All right, let's go with spaghetti.
Oh, actually, you know what? I think I'd like to see recipes for all three. It
Oh,
says, would you like the recipes for all three? Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting. So yeah, this is what I would like. I noticed one of the recipes and it is okay. I think looking up, it suggested soy sauce up here for one of them. Oh, lemon juice optional. So I have all of the ingredients for this recipe. Let's scroll up. Garlic optional, olive oil. Okay, that looks good. Soy sauce or any stir fry sauce, that's fine.
yeah, it's interesting. So these optional olive oil, so it assumes you have some basic.
Yeah, absolutely, which I think it satisfies my needs
Okay.
for my GPT.
Yeah,
This looks good. Did it offer me a joke?
it did.
Okay. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, so I like it. How do
Um,
we,
what's
what do we do
interesting,
next?
it didn't give the full meal, right? So there's no yogurt dessert here. So there's three main entrees.
Yeah,
This might be a case where be sure to provide
include a dessert option. Okay.
a, yeah, a dessert option or a full meal, just individual dishes
Yep.
options. So interestingly, so as soon as we changed the instructions here on the left, we went back to baseline, right? So it's, oh, we're going to start over given this new set of instructions, right?
Okay. Yep.
Uh,
Okay.
which is a pain, but yeah, GPT updated. So now we're back at the beginning.
Okay.
But assuming this will work, I don't want to type in everything.
Yeah. How do we publish this
Yeah,
or build?
so
Yeah.
let's hit create. Anyone with the link so you can actually read,
Yeah.
and hopefully this will save.
I think this was also yet another reason why, if I'm going to build GPTs on my own, I'm much more prone to create sooner rather than later versus playing with the configure, like building something that's good enough and then
Yeah.
start playing with the configuration.
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
so I can send you this
Okay.
link
Thank you.
and you could plan tonight's meal.
Thank you. This is another thing that I'm wondering as well. So you own this GPT because you created it. Is there any capability to share like rights for configuration?
I think only if you have like an enterprise plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll send this link to you and so you'll have access to it. But
Hmm.
I don't think you can change it.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure if you can see that configuration at all
Okay.
to be able to copy it and work from it. That's a good question.
Yeah, thank you for this. And totally okay if you don't want to answer it, the interviewer mindset from my perspective. I'm curious, when you're building GPTs right now, this was my use case as a working mom. Is there an example like you had mentioned building GPTs for something that you don't want to be thinking about and doing day by day? Is there a particular GPT that you've built that's been especially useful for your needs? And totally okay not to answer, but I'm curious.
I'm doing different things like I'll
But you are building GPTs?
I've built a few but I haven't even really used them that much.
Yeah.
It's just I'm more like using these tools to write like novel code and which is very hard, right? Because it's novel. It's not build a website, something that's been done a million times. I've got
Yeah.
particular problems I'm working on. And so the GPTs are not great for that, I'm finding.
Okay. Okay.
Everything is getting better, but yeah, it's a little tricky. I think there are in an enterprise environment, I think these can be very powerful, and that's what AWS was talking about this morning was like there are these tasks that you have to do and you got to go find this spreadsheet and do X and it's like all this stuff that's a real pain and not productive, but it is a repetitive cognitive task and it should be automated. And
Yep.
it's getting easier and easier to do with these apps and GPTs.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. To wrap up, you shared a lot about how to approach building GPTs. Any piece of advice for people who now have been convinced and persuaded that they'll try to build a GPT for one of their needs? Any big piece of advice that you'd have them think about? It might be repeating what we've already talked about, but in terms of building a GPT appropriately, any advice you'd give?
Yeah, think about what are the constants and what are the variables about this task that you're working on, and make sure that this GPT either knows what those constraints are or is going to ask you what those variables are. That's a key interaction that you should build into this.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I learned a lot. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay.